So today we're going to be talking about control structures. Control structures are things in our code that allow our code to do something new. And that new thing that it allows our code to do is to run in a new way that does not just go line by line by line. So far, everything we've done just executes one line at a time until it pauses or waits for input or gets an error or the program ends. It just goes through one line at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's no change in that. And while that's good and still can be useful for making programs, one of the downsides to that is that it limits what we can do because the code pretty much always just executes in the same way. And to make any kind of more advanced programming, what we need to be able to do is allow our code to make decisions, to go one way versus another. And so we have control structures. And a control structure is sort of like this. This is may not be personally familiar to you, but it's probably at least culturally familiar, right? You've seen it on a TV show or a cartoon or whatever. The infamous passing of the note with the critical question that plagued us all in grade school. Do you like me? Right? And this is a form of control structure in our lives because if I'm passing that note to somebody I think is interesting and I want to know if they think that I'm interesting too, their response to this dictates what I'm going to do next, right? Because if I get that note back and this box is checked, then I maybe am emboldened, right? I get a little bit more brave and maybe I talk to them on the playground or, see if they want to meet me for I don't know, what do kids have nowadays? A boba after school or something. Um, who knows? But if they check no, then maybe I just pretend like it never happened, right? I'm like, I didn't think so. I didn't like you anyway. No big deal. Like I just kind of retreat into self-protection at that point. So their response to that question, do you like me, influences what I'll do next. And that's exactly how a control structure works in your code. In your code, what you're going to be doing is asking questions. Is this true or not? And if it's true, then one set of code will be executed. If it's not true, then something else will happen. And so that in that way, we can create programs that are more complex and more responsive to the user. So the mechanism that we use for this is called an if statement. It's the most common structure in all of programming. And it looks like this in its most basic form. What we have is the word if, and then following that in the parentheses. Now the parentheses themselves are optional. You could leave them out in Python. In other languages, the parentheses are required. I personally usually put them in. Why? Because I program in about 6 different languages on a regular basis. It's easier for me to remember if I just do the things as similarly as possible across all of them. So that's why I do it. You might do it to delineate or just to recognize this is what I'm trying to decide if it's true or not. So in the parentheses, that might be where you would put the question, do you like me? So if you like me, then something happens. So if that thing is true in the parentheses, and then you'll notice a colon, not a semicolon. It's 2 dots, one above the other. That's a colon, okay? Not to be confused with the body part. This one is what terminates the if statement line. So at the end of that line, what we should have is if something is true, and the colon is, we sort of say it as the word then. So if something is true, then what do? So the colon is required. Okay. The next line, you'll notice in Python, must be indented. If you don't have at least one line of executable code beneath every if statement, you will get an error. So a lot of people put the if statement and they haven't typed the code yet, but they're saying, I'm going to just try this and see if the if statement works. They're going to get an error because you have to have at least one thing below that. In this case, if it's true, then Python will print this is true. It will execute that code only if the thing is true. If it's not true, nothing happens. It will skip that line. And if there's another line of code below this that's not indented, it will go to that line next. So just for clarity's sake, let's look at how this would happen in code. So if I say if true, then print this is true. Okay, so if I run this right now, you can see in just one moment, there you go, it'll say this is true. Because the word true, I know this is really deep stuff, guys. Pay attention. True is true 100% of the time. What else could be true? Maybe I'll say if x equals 5. Now notice I'm putting two equals here because when I'm asking if x equals something, if I put one equal sign, it's assignment. I'm saying x is equal to 5. If I put 2, I'm saying is x equal to 5. So if I have x up here, x equals 5, this is where I'm telling it x equals 5. This is where I am asking, does it equal 5? So if this is true, then it will print this line. So in this case, if I run that, of course, I just said x equals 5, so of course it does print it. If I say x equals 3 up here, then is this true now? No, x does not equal to 5, so that's false. And you can see it does not print that. Now, if I have another line of code beneath that that's not indented, okay, that line is not indented, which means it is not part of what we do if that statement is true. That's just going to be the next thing that happens. So if I run that now, you can see it says this always prints. It doesn't print this because x is not equal to 5. So if I change x back to 5, then it will print one line and then the other. You get a sense for how the flow works? Okay. So the part of the code that is indented here is referred to as a code block. Now, it doesn't look like a block right now, but this could be 100 lines of indented code. So I can have as many lines here as I want, and as long as they're indented together, they are part of that code block. So if x equals 5, this entire code block happens, one line at a time. So when I run that, it prints all 3 of those lines. And if I change x back to 3, it skips that whole code block. So either the whole code block goes or none of it goes. Now, what happens if I have a line here that is unindented in the middle of my code block? What happens is it messes up my code block, because as soon as I have an unindented line, that signifies to Python that I'm leaving that code block. So that code block that belongs to the if statement here is just this one line now, because I've broken it with my unindented line. And you'll notice that this indented line now is giving me an error. Why is it giving me an error? Because I don't have an if statement with it. If you have something that's indented, but it does not have an if statement, it doesn't know what to do with that because that code block doesn't belong to anything. It's like an orphan code block. So if I run this, you can see I get an indentation error. Always pay attention to the error message. It will give you a clue as to what's happening every single time. Unexpected indent. Why is it unexpected? Because there's no if statement to go with it. Okay, so that's the structure of if.